Everybody, welcome to episode 178 of Fight Chat Friday. So today's episode is going to be looking at the newest division that we have in ITF. It's the pre-juniors. So we're going to have a look at what is the difference between the standard and the level of this new division and what they need to make it to the next level, junior, and then eventually bring it to the senior ranks to be successful and hopefully be competitive at that top level of ITF competition.
Okay, folks, so our match that we've picked today, we'll get right into it. The minus 55 kilo final, Timofey Matvichuk from Ukraine and Mark Golart Sandrichan from Spain. Apologies if we butchered any of your names. But again, we have a very, very classic when it's Ukraine. We've got that left v right kind of thing coming up again.
Yeah, well, you have noticed that as you're a bit of a theory that a lot of the Ukraine contingent lead off that left leg, and we have the same here again. That traditional stance of that test step, very reminiscent of the likes of Ivan Grishuk and a few that have gone before from Ukraine like that. So obviously that's a stance and a setup that they favor. Straight off the bat, a lot of testing with the front leg, and we see the front leg carry is a big factor in this division and this particular fight so far. But what we'd like to see straight off the bat with a minute in, no real scores or nothing really has happened of much value, that we'd like to see a little bit behind the front leg carry, so a little bit more intention. But at the very least, you want to draw some reactions or squeeze your opponent to the edge a little bit more with this testing, and not just using the testing to relieve space or to relieve pressure. It's something that we actually see a lot in the senior ranks, Adrian, with the testing, just to kind of relieve that space pressure more than actually to use it to score or to set up an exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we want to see is that you make it a real threat. So when you lift up the leg to carry, the only reason to respect that is if it's a real threat. And, you know, we're starting to see here that the guys are experimenting a little bit maybe with, well, okay, what can I do to interact with it? And because in the first minute it was, well, I'll give up the space and then I'll take my turn. And this taking of turns is a thing that, we want to see that breakdown. We definitely want to see people interact earlier or try to challenge that first intention that you mentioned. So can we actually be close enough to challenge the initial leg lift? Now, we did see very early from Matvichuk that defensive side kick looked really sharp. Definitely able to pull the leg up quickly, but we need to break down this play and get it a little bit messier so that scores open up. Nobody wants to be in the ring right the way through their 2-minute rounds, their extra minute, and then 3 and 4 minutes of additional time waiting for a score to happen. It's a rough way to finish.
Yeah, it's very rare that we see the first round finish 0-0 with no scores at all on the board. So obviously these guys are quite talented. They've got to the final and they've made it this way to the World Championship. So obviously they have some skills behind them. So a little bit tentative at the beginning. And I think that's a big thing that you can take away from pre-juniors right off. You need to be able to be able to pull the trigger, essentially. So you can't just be tentative and look to counter. And I've seen that a lot from the pre-junior divisions. Those people who are likely to go first into exchanges and then be the last one out of contact, what we always talk about, these are the people that are becoming successful. If you counter and back up a lot, it's not going to be a good situation for you. Now, we do see Spain here with a little bit of a lead so far. Counter with the jumping punches, I think, is getting the value here. But overall, the distance for me, Adrian, in this fight so far has been quite long.
Too long.
So we see there's a big gap there. And I think that's what lead into just the first shot, just you go, I go with no real intention, because we're not able to bypass this range that we can see. So here it's quite long. So that front leg carry, it's easy to back up and we don't have anything behind it. So it's just a single shot.
And the third warning for Spain now has just brought it to a 2-1 in favour of Ukraine. Very tight and narrow scores. And the longer it goes like this, the more difficult it is psychologically to actually take that action and pull the trigger, because you kind of feel like, okay, I don't want to lose. And we're getting into that position, I think, for these guys where it's trying hard not to lose rather than trying hard to win.
Yeah, we see a lot of testing from Ukraine as well. I would like to see you using that test to actually set something up. So it's nice to test to keep your opponent on the back foot and maybe you in control of the tempo and the intensity, like we see a test here. Mm-hmm. But then it's you need to put that to use as well at some stage. Again, we see it's not just ideal to have one entry shot. So if you just have that front leg carry and there's nothing behind it, you need to have some other solutions or other strategies to be able to get into contact. So that's a very important lesson for anybody there that's coming through the ranks at this level. And that's something that you'll pick up as you go for sure. But another big thing for me, Adrian, with this particular fight is the ring positioning and the control of the ring. Whereas we see a lot of times the fighters aren't squeezing correctly to get their opponent to exit, and they might just leave them off the hook. Here we see a reset. Look where the guys reset from the match.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
almost back into the center of the ring. So you should be just taking your mat back and get into the center. And this actually happens twice. If we go to the end of round one, Adrian, with like around 5 seconds to go as well,
yeah.
we can see another really good example of this ring positioning. So here, look where the guys reset. Like the 7 seconds go, he comes all the way back into the center blue. So
Yeah.
that's just a lack of experience when it comes to ring positioning and understanding how important the exits and the warnings will be.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I think, when you're looking at those lessons in terms of like the spacing, attacking, or your whether it's a test or a carry, having that intention to actually create a threat and be willing to follow up. If you're going to lift your leg, you should have some concept of what you want your opponent to do or what you expect them to do, and that should determine what your follow up is going to be. So for me, it looks like at the moment both of them are lifting. It's like I'll lift and see. I'll wait and see what they do, and then hoping that they'll be able to make a decision from there. And we only saw the 2 or 3 exchanges in broken play where we saw maybe what these guys are capable of when the brakes come off and and they're firing on full cylinders. So I think there is a message there, and I've certainly seen it myself as well with the pre-juniors, where maybe they're training and they haven't had categories in their countries yet for pre-juniors. I know certainly in Ireland we don't really have categories for pre-juniors, so they're not used to competing against the more experienced juniors, and maybe that more defensive reactive style is appropriate where they're a little bit not favoured in the match against the more experienced juniors. But then when it's head to head against someone who is perfectly matched to you and your level, we're expecting to see a little bit more go.
Yeah, definitely. That rule of create, don't wait. It's one of the things that we put into the lessons that we've been talking about since the start of this channel. It goes along with a lot of other things. If you're creating all the time, not just waiting for your opponent, you're going to be putting yourself to the forefront. And then when we look at the stats that we've been gathering over the last while, we can see that will put you to the forefront in the contacts made as well. Because if you're attempting more and going for more attempts, you're going to make more contact. And that's just the nature of what we're doing here. So we can see massive values on the attempted carries from both guys, and we see there's not much attempts of these being translated to contact. Now, we did see a couple of exchanges from that, but generally not really getting to contact. We're going to switch some of these stats as well. I've underlined them here. We used to track the attempts and the attempted shots, but now I think the contact rate is the most important thing that we've noticed over the last while. So it's fair enough to be attempting all these shots, but are you making contact with these shots? So that's what we're going to kind of focus on more. So far, we haven't seen any fight that we've tracked that the losing fighter has made more contacts. So that's something to bear in mind. So we're going to be tracking that going forward. As we see here, very low contact made from both fighters. Percentage-wise are what we kind of generally see. But I think the front leg carry was a major factor for both guys, but they didn't translate then after that. So that's one contact every 15 seconds versus one every 30 seconds. If you're looking to win a fight and you're making contact over every 30 seconds in a 4-minute fight, you're not really putting yourself to the forefront there, giving yourself every advantage possible. So that's something to be aware of for sure.
It'd be an interesting look back if you compare these stats to the one that we had between Finn Martin and Yassin Talhawi at the 57 senior. So obviously we're taking 2 jumps there in terms of the categories, but at a very similar weight class. These are similar size guys, and the work rate in terms of the number of attempts and the number of contacts from both fighters is close to double this. So there is a very, very big difference there in terms of the willingness to pull the trigger.
Yeah, definitely. So that's it. Pull the trigger is the aim of the game, but it's easier said than done. So you want to be able to set up combinations and exchanges, and we can see here the exchanges overall was down to 7. So what are we tracking here? Not just the single shots, but the amount of times there was an exchange and a back and forth. Every single time Ukraine were first into contact. So that just tells us that Spain needs to be a little bit more proactive on the create and don't wait side of things, where he was very effective in terms of being last in contact, 3 times that he was the last person versus 1. So he is being effective when we do get into contact, but he just needs to be a bit more effective creating that contact. So that's very important. Average flag score of 2-0. Obviously, that's a very fine margin here and not much to be given away. The amount of shots they were throwing for these guys, we can see all these pre-juniors have all the shots in the bank generally, and they can throw all the shots in the pads, and they have lovely combinations, but they're sticking to a more diverse range of selection. Obviously, hands were the more effective shot for Spain, and the side kick and front leg shots were more effective for Ukraine, getting most of the scores for him.
Yeah. So this is just our markers, our triad of control, and in this case, and it was very, very obvious from the previous stats, it was going to have to lean towards Ukraine, where a slightly better job done of controlling the centre of the ring and working from the centre out. A little bit better in terms of creating that pressure on the exits, and the warnings that were picked up by Spain really did come into play in this match, in particular with that initial flip from Spain leading off of the on 2 cards to Ukraine leading on 2 cards. In terms of the distance, neither were exceptionally good on that point, but the fact that Ukraine came into contact first on each of the occasions would certainly give Ukraine the edge on the distance. And then in relation to the intensity and the tempo, we could see just in terms of the work rate and the number of contacts, Ukraine was at double the rate of Spain. So again, we have to give the marker for control of that to Ukraine.
Yeah, so what are the learnings from this? And the whole point of this video is not for us to look at pre-juniors and say all the things they're doing wrong. They're doing a lot of things really, really well. These guys have got to the final of World Championships, which is a fantastic achievement. But we're looking to how can we help other people who are in a similar situation to translate and transition from this pre-junior into junior and do so successfully, and then move up a step potentially to be a successful senior. So we're trying to help people here who are coming along this journey like we were earlier in our careers, trying to just transition. If this was out there when I was coming through as a 14-year-old, I would be so over the moon with this and the things you can take on and learn from. So that's the idea of this. We're not just talking cloud on anybody or trying to put anybody down or anything like that. So just make sure you understand where we're coming from. So the distance is very long, obviously, and a little bit too far for anybody to land in contact, particularly off the front leg carries. That's something that we've noticed in this particular fight. The front leg carry was used for relief of space and pressure, more so to create anything and to build any scores. All right, and we did notice as well there was nothing really behind that front leg and a little bit too much respect for it when it wasn't necessary. So anytime somebody lifted it and carried with their front leg, the other fighter backed up a little bit and gave him all the respect needed for that when there wasn't any reason to, or there was no real evidence that they were going to do anything with it based on what we've seen throughout this fight. There was a very much an idea of you go, I go presence here, where they're taking turns. Now we did see a 2x contact rate in this fight as an advantage for Ukraine, but there was still this idea of you have a go, I have a go, particularly off the front leg carries. Are hands tidy enough at pre-junior? That's something that we should probably look at a little bit more in depth. And obviously, as they get more experience, they're going to tidy up the scores and be able to be more valuable with these hands. But we can see a lot of initiations to go to contact with hands, but they were kind of a little bit hesitant, and then that can allow the opportunity for your opponent to lift up that defensive side kick or things like that. So maybe if you can tidy up the hands and be a bit more confident, that could give you a massive advantage in this division. So testing without any real intention or threat, we've really spoke about that as well. So using your footwork and your setups to really put the other person on the back foot is going to be important, and we really highlighted the ring positioning here. So the 5 seconds in round 1 remaining and the 1:38 remaining in round 2. We can see 2 instances where there was an exit and then the side who was pressurizing the other person out came right back into the center and gave them all the space back when there was no real need to. Straight line backing up, 2s and 3 steps back in a row, that's a no-no if you want to be successful at the higher levels. So you need to make sure you get out of this habit ASAP and have something to be able to either break an angle or to put a stop to somebody's momentum so you're not backing up in straight lines. And then finally, we highlighted the idea of not squeezing on exits. So when you're on the edge and you have somebody, you need to have a big threat and something there that you can squeeze somebody out of the ring, not leaving them just get to the last mat and then have an exit strategy for them to come back in. You want to push them out of the ring using your techniques so you can rack up those warnings and have something in your favor.
So there's quite a bit in that, and it'll be very, very interesting to see in Poland at the European Championships if there's a difference already, or if it, as we look across different pre-junior divisions, which we might do over the next couple of weeks, just to see, do the stats hold for male, for female? Are we seeing some similar things across competitors? And what I might expect to see is that they'll be quite different, that there's going to be a lot more variation among the pre-juniors because it's brand new. We're going to see, quite a wide variety of people, but it will definitely be something that's interesting to see. It's new for us, and it's a new development in the ITF, so we'll see how that matures into the next European Championships. But that is all for this week, so we'll see you next Friday.
That's it. We'll catch you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.